live again today on Imagine Fitting It podcast with Kim Nugent. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Yes. And, where does this find you? Where do you call home these days?
Houston, Texas.
Okay. It's interesting, very interesting, hon, because I don't hope you don't mind me calling you hon. That was my Dayton Midwestern. That I just had a very amazing author named, you might have heard of him, a professor of African American Studies, Mr. Gerald Horn, whose episode just released, and he's out of the University of Houston.
I just listened to that episode.
Wow, you are good, girl. You're trying to understand who is this cat that's coming at her. So
it's always helpful to know.
I'm going to take that as a real both a compliment and really strong advice. So thank you for that. I like sharing and I like gifts, and that was a great one. I do my best, but I wear many hats, and as a physiotherapist, and basically my whole career has been, transported and involved through the power of mentors in my life. And, when I reached out to you, I'm thinking, okay, this is a person that's on the front line of something that really, really matters, and something that we really need to pay attention to, and both wholeheartedly, and as my podcast's intention is all about mentors, healthy lives, and community. And at this community roots, we are powerful. So I don't know about you, and I'm sure a lot of people are starting to understand this, think globally, act locally, and act even harder locally. And that's what my purpose is. This podcast was in dedication to my late nephew, who we lost to opioid addiction. And if this is a passion project, and if I believe if I can just save one other life, this is all worth it. And I like to reach out to people such as yourself on the front lines of pretty darn big issue. And tell me, I'd love to start, Kim, about telling us a little bit like where you're from, what was your upbringing before we get into your career? Where'd you grow up, and what was family life like? And, I'm sure that formed you in a lot of ways.
In so many ways. One, I'm excited about, your passion and my passion are the same around mentorship. And the other comment that you made about really, think globally but act locally. The more that I'm on this planet every day, the more I know how important that is. But going back to the original question is, I actually grew up in Texas. I was born in San Antonio, was there 2 years, and then moved to Houston after that. My dad married my mother, and they had 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6. And I think, until this morning, honestly, I probably would not have said my dad was my mentor. I've had 2 really strong mentors in my life, actually 3. But I just realized this morning, listening to one of your other episodes, was he really was. 1, because of his work ethic, and 2, because he had 6 kids, and you can only imagine what it would take to put food on the table. I can't, honestly, if you want to know the truth. But anyway,
Wow.
He worked during the day. He threw newspapers at night for the Houston Post. And at 30, decided he was going to become an attorney. And it took him 10 years to go through law school because he was juggling many things all at the same time. And he did become an attorney at 40.
I have just to say, did he have 6 kids when he started that?
Yes.
Oh my God. That is a huge, you go, oh man, that is just unbelievable. But continue. I'm just amazed.
So that piece, but I think the part I've taken away and has really hit me every single day, particularly the work that I do now, is that he became a criminal attorney. And one of the things, and he practiced law for 30 years, and one of the most important things, we saw it firsthand every day. He didn't even have to say anything. We actually saw it, that he believed in the innocence of every single person that came to him. And he treated everybody, regardless of background, income, anything, like he believed it in his soul that they were innocent until proven guilty. And that's something you don't ever see. I think that what happens a lot of times, particularly in the legal profession, is people get frustrated, jaded, tired of hearing stories or whatever, and they stop listening to people. But every person that you talk to has a different background, a different experience. And when you stop listening, you stop becoming curious. And when you stop becoming curious, you can't solve anything.
You listen, you must have been listening to my podcast because I am this one curious bird and this is going to be a really nice conversation. So wow, I hear you on so many levels, and the one thing I want to relate to is that work ethic and the fact that when I ask people, mentors, and a lot of people have right off, and God bless them, they're so fortunate, and I am one of them, that our parents were our launching pads. And then it created that framework of maybe some initiating some interest, but you said, point out most strongly, the work ethic, the compassion, the openness, and the ability to what he did after, from 10-year investment is just amazing. So, did any early, obviously he's a powerful force, and was your mother a homemaker? What'd she do? And your siblings, did everybody get, how was the house energy?
As you can imagine, loud.
Right?
So my mom was a stay-at-home mom until my youngest brother went to school, and then she went to work. And she was an office manager for an engineering company, and then ended up doing that, and then retired, and then went to work for another company for another 10 years, and then retired again. But for both of them, definitely learned discipline, definitely learned work ethic for sure. And so when you don't know it when you're growing up that's what you're seeing. I think you appreciate it when you're a little bit older and then go, oh, that's what all that was about. But it was fun. I mean, it was just fun. And I said loud, just because 6 people, 6 kids in the house and 2 parents. And usually we had animals around some way, a cat, a dog, or something or other. So yeah, but the really interesting thing now, as we're talking about work ethic, is if you had my sisters and brothers on this show, they would probably say the same thing. Every single one of them has a work ethic that is, you can't compete with anybody's work ethic in our family.
Hey, you know, you are hitting on so many levels, hon, because I'm one of four, that mayhem, that energy. But wow, my mother gave us a sense, a work ethic beyond the pale, and it was channeled down through her, through just a couple generations of German immigrants working the land, the farm, and the work ethic and the community and that integrity. And you work hard and you're true and you don't judge people. You try to be kind until they prove you wrong, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I can definitely relate in all those levels. And that right there, I think the comment about when you said, when you're young, you can't comprehend, if you think about it, right? We're such vulnerable creatures in that little brain. And when you start to slowly comprehend, like, oh, I don't necessarily like that or whatever. But if the proper framing, gets through those little patches and okay, we'll try to keep you out of trouble so you don't die. And so you don't get into trouble, and how to interact in here in this internal family unit. And that's going to be the strong example about when you go out to the real world in the community. And I think like you said at first, I mean, we see stuff, kids see stuff. They see a lot more and they sense a lot more energy than just a word, but actions we know speak volumes. I'm a very visual guy. I had my own awareness and discovery that I had with basically a full-blown ADHD. I didn't fully understand that, but I kind of did. And I took on exercise to blow out all this excessive energy in my mind. and to channel it. And I focused all that extreme concentration, and that was my avenue. Before that, I was just this kind of creative soul with these really crazy imaginative ideas trying to get along. And I found, like, a lot of my peers in my same age, they didn't understand me whatsoever, because I don't know if I was saying things that were on a different level, maybe not necessarily intellectually, but just like on maybe like just a kind of humanistic level, because we're all such gifts, right? These little creatures, and have this energy and this development. And, it's almost like I ended up hanging around older people, because I didn't feel comfortable with kids my own age, because it seemed like they didn't get me, or they didn't respect what I was coming with, my originality. And these older people, I would hang out with guys that were like 4 or 6 years older than me, and I would entertain them because they were like, "What'd you just say?" And it's so in other words, I used my comedy humor and my curiosity to get me through. And it wasn't until later I discovered that. But, going back to like your shaping of you, and like, was there any like for early life experience like that formed your passion for leadership and mentorship and service? You personally?
Yes. So when I was 14, a neighbor girl asked me if I wanted to come work with her. She was working at a little pie shop in Houston, and I didn't want to babysit. I mean, I had been responsible for 5 other children, so that wasn't I did not want to do that. And so I said, sure. So, truthfully, I lied about my age at 14, and because the legal hiring age was still 16. And, but I was very mature for my age. And so I got hired, and I was probably 9 months into the job. And it kind of opened up a whole new world to me. I mean, I love the whole business. I love the customers. I liked learning. I love learning to this day. And the thing that I noticed is there were some things I didn't know much, but there were some things going on that didn't make any sense to me at all. And I didn't have the proper terminology that I do now, but in those days, some of the practices that were happening, I'm thinking, financially, this doesn't make sense. What I'm saying really in today's world is, I was concerned about the food cost. I was also concerned about some practices of the assistant manager and some other things. And again, I'm 14 years old, for crying out loud. And I took those concerns to the owner, and he was lovely, and he actually listened to me. And long story short, it's not because of what I said. It was something else that happened that was more wrong is the only word I can think of. Anyway, the assistant manager was let go, and he asked me if I would be the assistant manager. And I had to fire this guy.
At 14.
Yes, I had to fire this guy, and I didn't even know. And so he made it easy for me. The owner said, look, you can call me before, you call me after. Just ask him for the keys. I will talk to him, but ask him to leave.
Wow.
I did. It was very scary. I remember that, but he told me to do it, so I was going to do it. And so I did it and did become the assistant manager. And if I had known a little bit more, I would have really maybe heightened my concern to the owner. But long story short is the owner lost the business because the food costs and there was just too many practices that did not correspond to really running a healthy organization. But that was the first thing that I learned. But I knew then that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the hospitality industry. I loved every part of it. I'm like, I want more. So fortunately, I was able to go to University of Houston and earn my degree in hotel and restaurant management from the Hilton College, which was life-changing in so many ways. And when I was 16, though, I actually was still in high school, and I was in DECA, which is Distributive Education Clubs of America.
I was in junior achievement. Yep. Go ahead.
And so that track, this was so long ago. This was in the 70s. So the only option for girls in those days was retail. Well, I was not going to sell clothes. I had no interest in clothes. And so I went to my teacher and I said, look, I've already been working 2 years. I'd worked in a pie shop. I worked for Kentucky Fried Chicken. I worked for Shipley's Donuts. I said, I want to work in a food service operation. Is that possible? And my teacher listened to me and she said, let's see. So she ended up giving me an opportunity to interview for Foley's, a retail chain, now Macy's, and got the job. And that's when everything changed. And that was my first mentor, Barbara McDonald. And I was able to work in the restaurant, and she just took me under her wing. She taught me everything. Now I'm 16. So not only am I learning about the industry and the business, but I needed to learn about life. There were so many things I didn't. Now, I said I grew up in a family of 6, but it was a very sheltered family. We went to Catholic school. We had our little friends in our little neighborhood and all that. So many things I didn't know. I mean, basic things that you would think in today's world, you would have known at probably 8. I don't know. But anyway, so at night, she would take me home to her apartment. Her husband worked nights, and so she would cook these fabulous dinners at night for her husband to come home. And she taught me how to cook, and she taught me how to have a professional library and things to continue to expand. And she taught me about association. She taught me so many things. And I'm still a young girl, and I'm not always making the right decisions personally. And she always brought me back to the right place. And she was my mentor for 16 years until she passed away.
That's beautiful. And I will tell you, from the store owner who probably both saw it in you, and maybe to whatever degree he saw that in you, and combined with how much he needed you to do that for him, to maybe whatever, and to what as scary as that is, and as difficult as that was, we know this is what stimulates and keeps our brain developing and growing and on a cognitive function and these kinds of challenges. And I'm fascinated by the neuroscience. But getting back to, your neighborhood and back in the day, and I'm with you, hon. In the 70s, I was a kid, and that work ethic, and that when you say that sense of community, where I also went to Catholic school, and we had this neighborhood, and it was a tight group, and we had all these games, and it was just a kind of different kind of, it was a lifestyle that was almost, it was almost magical because it was so contained. There was this unit where I still think about this every day. And this is Sunday, we're recording, and that I would hear the church bells from our church. And it was the same church where I went to school every day for kindergarten till 8th grade until I graduated. And I can still, my last memory is that community and that church standing out front of all my buddies, bunch of guys in these little suits and these little 70s mop haircuts, like the Beatles, and graduating. And so, from there, all that framework, as you said, that sense of grounding, that sense of just like it's on this innate conditioning where your brain is still developing, and it gives you so many tools. So I go back to bless our parents, and that we were the some really lucky ones, because I'm sure I want to get more into your work and your journey, but man, it's just a true blessing. And what I think that there's being no stronger bond than a mother and her child. I think there's no other stronger relationships powerful, which is so needed right now. It's getting really, I don't want to say, it's just a really terrible time that we're having right now in our history with our young men in this country, in the way of industry technology and how their brains develop and how the girls' brains develop, and women's opportunity rights in the work, and the misunderstanding of an education system of how the young men's brains are. It's physiologically, science has shown that the boys' brains don't develop as fast as women's. I'm not trying to go against the grain of women's rights. They only still make 84 cents on the dollar. But I want to bring in a conversation, and I'm passionate about I probably could have done pretty better if I was held back 1 year just for my brain to develop. Not the fact that I didn't know what I was really doing, but from a sense of decision making and maturity and whatever. So tell us, you obviously she sounded like a really powerful one in 16 years. That's amazing.
Amazing in so many ways, because when she left that employment, every place she went, she took me next to that next opportunity in food service. So there was never a time, that I wasn't learning under her. The other thing I would say is, going back to what you said about your own background, very parallel. I went to Catholic school, kindergarten through 8th grade. My 8th grade had 36 graduates. It was a big deal. Just like 8th grade is a big deal today. But I think what's missing today, and I normally don't look at what's missing unless I'm solving a problem, but I think the timeliness of this show is the most important time ever. And the reason I believe that is because so many young people today don't have mentors, and they're not living in a community like we grew up, like our neighborhood was safe. And what would be very different today versus the way we grew up, and I don't know that this happened for you, but if the neighbor parent saw me doing something wrong, they didn't think twice about intervening, right? Hey, Kim, you don't run in the street, whatever.
Right.
But today, because it's not that cohesive neighborhood per se, because people are single family homes, or people are busy and they close the door and that's the end of you don't see people anymore and all of those things. And so that's a missing piece. That's why mentorship today is critical, I think, to be able to help shape young people to be able to make some right choices, because if they don't have that guidance, where are they going to get it from?
So eloquently said, and thank you so much for that. What I find as a compliment in the timing of my show. And, this curious cat is both passionate on a personal level about keeping my nephew's memory alive and mean something.
Mm-hmm.
And that, when you said those mentors, to try to tell them, it's almost like that, or those early critical years when you said, your neighbor, like, correct them, like, don't do that. That's kind of like, that's not right. That's not right. And these little opportunities. And so you're seeing where the community is, and the child who's getting corrected should have that framework to say, okay, I know that's wrong. This person is older and wiser, but it's almost like not what you're supposed to do, but just number one, make sure you don't do something you're going to regret. And then being able to have that, because we know there's all kinds of circumstances in terms of how children are brought into this world, and the ability of the parent to comprehend, to deliver the goods, to really like follow through and have that, right, that foundation. But when you first began working in the correctional environments, what realities challenged or reshaped your perspective?
I thought in the last 5 years in particular, I thought I knew a lot. But every day I'm finding out I really don't know anything, meaning there's so much more to learn. And I mean that in a very good way, because I'm still very curious. I think I wasn't surprised, because I came from hospitality, went into higher education. And so as a faculty member, started part-time like everybody else does. And I had big administrative experience. And when they saw that about 2 years in, I ended up becoming the dean, and worked my way up and became a university president. And so I kind of use that as my framework for the work that I do in prisons.
True leadership there, dear. I will tell you, I see it all over you. And so please continue. I want to just give you that compliment that you are a true leader.
Well, thank you. I just love students. I love learning. I love all of it. And I can't get enough of it. To me, it's just fun and meaningful. But by the same token, I'm very clear that when I would see students come in just through the admissions process, and we would have orientation, and then let's fast forward, 4 years later, whatever, I never will be able to. I have yet to predict who is going to walk across that stage at graduation and who is not. You can say anything you want to say in the beginning, but honestly, that typically isn't who graduates. It's somebody who maybe you didn't think could make it, but they have something inside them. They have a motivation inside them that nobody else can take away. And so that's one thing. I think the other thing that I learned very quickly on it in the university was, because I worked with staff who didn't necessarily see it the way I see things, which is pretty unique, I would say. And, when students would make a mistake, maybe their behavior wasn't what it needed to be or whatever, their follow through, like, and then they would want to take a heavy hand to that. I'm like, no, 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 no. This is why they're here. If they don't learn here now, then they're going to repeat that when they go out there. And so this is an opportunity for us to be able to teach and learn. And I still say this to this day, whatever industry you're in, whether you want to believe this or not, we only have two jobs. Your title can be whatever your title is, but either we are teaching or we are learning, and there isn't anything else. And so, I don't care whether it's the facilities guy or the receptionist or whatever department they're working in, there's an opportunity for you to be able to teach that young person something different that's going to help them be the better version of themselves. And that's what I find in prison. So I think that what people would be really surprised is, I go in and I spend 2.5 days working directly with residents, we call them, not inmates, but what I love every part of it, because and just so you know how I go in, I don't talk about crime. I don't talk about sentencings. That's not my job. My job is to go in and teach them how to feel confident being a mentor, because I think where most mentorship programs, and I'll say from the university side, fall apart is there's no structure. So they'll spend a lot of ideas putting a proposal. Wouldn't it be great if we had this mentorship program and we could bring the alums back and we'll match them up with the freshmen? All that sounds fantastic. And it is. And then they have a meet and greet and they put a lot of time and effort into it. And that's also great. But about the second or third meeting, everything kind of falls away. There's no, what are we talking about? What are we going to get out of this? And I really believe that structure, and you get to bring your own experience to it, but a structured mentorship program where you can actually demonstrate the outcomes of the effect of that program is really where it's at. And today in the world we live in, it's all about data. So it has to be evidence-based approach to actually making transformational change. And so when I'm working with, and the other reason has nothing to do with me, I'll be honest with you. It has to do, this is a peer-led mentorship program because these guys trust each other. They're walking the same path. They don't think the same way. Their experiences are totally different, which is challenging for mentors. And that's where you see the growth on the mentor side. And the mentees, where the growth is, they have never been able to be in a small group where it's confidential, they trust, and they can share feelings that they have never talked about. And that's a win for everybody.
Listen, I'm going to follow that up with you, Kim. And, I think we're going to have some more conversations off camera. My work in my field, as I mentioned to you before on camera, my essence, I was an artist, and I've been a very creative, curious cat. And my favorite words when I was a kid, 2 words, and still to this day, is "what if?"
Best question ever.
I understood, I came to realize that on my own personal journey to comprehend my world around me, knowing or not knowing that I couldn't sit still, and I had all this energy and this creative life in me, and it ends up being ADHD. Again, I've never even been formally diagnosed. Everything I've read, no, because I've read a lot and experienced a lot and had fantastic mentors, and I've gotten to a point where I created this program. I was so inspired by my mentors that they inspired me further to take some of what they did, both on a rogue level and on very, kinesiologists and physiologists, educated people that are I never went through that huge programs and whatever. So I was a self-learner, and I had these mentors that were just super powerful. They were like, look outside the box. I had guys like that were, and women that were from all different ranges of life, and they were successful in different areas of what we call our society. And the one thing that all stood out was just go for it, which God bless my sister, that was her favorite line. And mine was what if? And I came of age with her. So I'm getting back to what you said about that structure. And it's like, what are we getting out of this? Why are we coming together, and your ability to communicate? I've created this program, and my moniker, I'm known as the Balance Professor. If you go to thebalanceprofessor.com, everybody can learn all about my journey and my efforts and what I do. But I created this program called BASE, Balance, Awareness, Cognitive Engagement. And it's a simple little balance beam that sits on the floor. It's got little challenges to it and all kinds of, we know movement is powerful. And the science has been around forever in terms of education, where, my mentors were the leading guys on the education field, doing these comprehensive studies and talking about that data, proven data that they gathered in terms of engaging a child before their most difficult class and raising their heart rate up and bursting their blood flow through, raising it above their highest normal. And then they go into their most difficult class and their grade point averages were raising 15 to 20% higher and improving. There was so much media and attraction. There were countries from around the world that came to do documentaries on their work, and their work was highlighted. And I'm not sure if you're ever familiar with this guy. His name is Dr. John Rady, and it was Exercise in the Brain. And that book itself was based on my mentor. I ended up being two of my mentors, indirect mentors, that did that program. That whole book was written about that. And so it's out there. We need to create opportunities and structure, like, what am I getting out of this? Well, I come at it at this, because on a neurological side, I have this program I call BASE, and I can bring it in, and I can have a group of 5 people. They can be men or women, or I can have a large group with broken down to 4 or 5 little groups, and I can have them do physical challenges that are fun and engaging and very practical, functional, and they're going to learn about how their body works. And so we compartmentalize little work, right? With little pieces of the puzzle. Because when you say that, I can envision every meeting, every community getting together. Okay, we have this goal. What are we doing today? Who's talking about what? Who wants to lead today? And what my program does is you take away, every time you come and talk about something, you're going to be physically feeling better and stronger and more in tune with your body on a physiological level. And in order to do that, while you're doing that, we're going to talk about what information we want to exchange about ideas about this issue we have. And this is why we're all gathered. So it's both of a form of physical expression, taking very high cognitive concentration, and you can talk about topics while you're doing them, and you can associate movements. And so you're going to, every time all of a sudden the guy learns how to do a proper step up or a lunge or something, whatever, and he's like, yeah, I remember when Jane told me about that concept, or Kim, and I'm like living that every day. Every time I just drop down to tie my shoe, I think of Kim, and it supports my, like, yeah, that felt great. And I got that point across. But getting back to your work, and why I said, like, we need to talk off camera, is because I'm looking to empower. The education system is very tough to crack into. And my next inroads on my work is I'm getting ready to do a new series called WON, W-O-N, Warriors of Now. And it's all about the athletics. So I have a new podcast partner coming in, and I'm trying to backdoor getting into the education system, because it's very difficult to approach somebody with educational templates. And that's what I'm providing. So I can definitely empower athletes, and I'm going to try to show that math, science, civics teacher that they can empower, or a person like you can go in there and talk about general concepts, life concepts, allow them to express themselves freely. And you can have a person that's really very, like you said, they're really maybe really smart, but never really got comfortable with their base foundation growing up to really express themselves. So if you can express yourself physically, then you can get relaxed enough to start to talk about, right, your emotional side. And my creative side, I'm a writer. So I believe that arts are the expression for mental health, right? To voice it out, or put it on a piece of paper of paint, photography, whatever it is, some creative, or build a chair as a carpenter, to the idea of self-care, So anyway, I'm going to get back to you after I've been on this little thing, because I say this passionately, because this is my mission, to educate people what you're doing on the front lines, what you're finding out, how we from the community can keep some forces going when we vote and look to like try to make improvements in how we educate our kids that are, right out of the house to hopefully trying to avoid having them getting in circumstances being incarcerated. So you've
So you
worked
said
like,
a lot there for sure.
yeah,
So I would say the base program to me, the way I heard it was, I love things like that because it's a way to anchor something, right? So
yes,
we're bringing in all of that. Um, Going back to kind of where you started in the very beginning about think globally, but act locally. I've been thinking more and more and more about that. And so a lot of the prisons, well, I'm not going to say that's not true. Some prisons are actually located in secondary communities and some are in major metropolitan areas. But let's think about secondary communities because they tend to be more there probably than in the major metropolitan areas. And my program is amazing and we're getting amazing results and the guys feel it and see it and the shortcoming is in the community. What I mean by that is that wouldn't it be great if people came around a table and really talked about how can we as a community embrace people who have had a record, who have actually transformed their life. They've taken programs and they see something now better for themselves and they don't want to go back. And those people exist. And in fact, what I'm going to finish that thought and then I'm going to come back to something you just said. And so one of the things is obviously they need employment. So why couldn't we think kind of like you think about what if? I think why couldn't we think differently about the problems that we face? So let's have it be a win-win. Here's an example. Let's say that there are certain industries in your local community and smaller ones, they only tend to be 2 or 3 sometimes. And so what are those jobs? And what if those employers could be sitting at the table specifically to be able to say, you know what, we could start training these guys while they're still in prison. And now we got a workforce because we have such a shortage in the United States about people. These guys are gifted, they're talented, and their work ethic many times is very, very strong. The other thing is that then what about our academic partners saying, all right, not everybody needs a GED, by the way, in prison. Maybe they had that already, or maybe they even had associate's degree. Maybe they want to do something else or certifications. Then the next thing is that food. Technology, they're so far behind because they don't have access to the internet and things like that. How can we get them ready to go? You have to have an email address. You have to have a cell phone. You have to have a place to live. What about housing? Would you be willing to at least try to have an application be accepted for one person? We're not saying you don't even have to change the world. One person, take that chance on a person. Churches are the same thing. So, is the church open to welcoming people who had a felony record and now are getting out? So it's going to take a village, honestly, and
right,
in order to do that. But the thing, going back to something you said, which is really who you are as a creative, and that is that so many of those men are so creative. There are poets, there are artists, there are motivational speakers, they're all in the making, waiting for that chance. But when they start my program, they're very quiet. They're not really sure, right? And so what happens is when graduation happens, we have a formal graduation at the end of usually around 9 months. And so they all take part. So a couple of mentors, couple of mentees really talk about the impact for them personally or all of that. And to see them behind the podium and speaking, because for most people, that's the worst thing is to have to publicly
oh,
speak.
oh
And
yes,
and they speak with such heart and such passion and it's amazing. And it just continues to grow. So my model is exactly what I said. I go in, the first time I go in, the warden chooses the mentors because I don't have a basis for that. And then we go through the program and the mentees then get to be trained as mentors. So you learned it as a consumer of education. Now you're going to be the facilitator of that. And I don't want to lose my mentors if they still have longer to serve, and many of them have life sentences. And so I'm going to teach them accelerated coaching skills. I'm not going to teach them to be a coach, but accelerated coaching skills, because now they have this vast knowledge and they can help support the staff to be able to kind of shepherd this group. Then what happens is usually about the third or fourth time that I've gone back, then there's a gentleman who has risen to the top saying he's found his purpose in so many ways and he loves the teaching aspect of it. Now, all the mentors have found their purpose, because what happens is it gets them out of bed in the morning because they can pour into somebody else, which for the
Yes.
first time they're doing good work, and they love that feeling, which is great. And it feels idle time. But to the next person, the guy who says, yeah, and I'll say, okay, would you like to co-facilitate with me? I will teach you to be me. So we co-facilitate and we trade that off. And then the next time I go, you can be me. And then I pull myself out. And that's really the way the model works. And in a couple of places where I really see it, if the gentleman is released and this is who, and he's found himself, I'm going to let him take the program and run with it. If he's still in the prison, which I have that too, then they're going to continue to run that program without me, which is fine. Now I say that, but I'm still calling the facility every week. In most cases, in one prison, I call every 3 weeks because I've been doing this for so long. And the gentleman who runs is spectacular. And so, it is always their program. I say, I'm here to help kind of give you the structure and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's your program. You make it whatever it needs to be.
That is such it's a just how it's a shining example, and it could be presented to companies like this. We have this captured group of people who most are really probably, if not directly, but soon to be eventually influenced subtly on different levels. And then all of a sudden it just grows and they get excited. And then all of a sudden they get to they get to show each other along the way how powerful each of them are. And they can tend to start to respect each other, respect that level of both openness, intelligence, integrity, and actions, because obviously, somehow they got into that situation because their actions were not necessarily the most right. The best for, civil society in terms of interacting with your neighbor, and obviously, right? So we don't know those circumstances, but it's such an inner machine that you're creating, and I applaud you, because it's that mentoring, right? That just grows, and say that person has that long term. They can keep that sense of purpose and have a sense of being alive right there. And they happen to be limited what their freedoms are. But man, the pride and probably everything they never had or realized they had there's a foundation that this could have is probably like another world. Like, wow, let's think about it. If you just never had what we had in parents, and you were just all of a sudden plopped down and you're like on the streets and you're trying to survive and whatever. Come on. It's overwhelmingly unimaginable for me.
So you bring up a great point. To your point, the people who are incarcerated did not grow up in the way we grew up. They did not. No way. In most cases, it would be very rare.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing, though, is the more that I'm getting deeper and deeper into the work, is that I do believe, and I use this word intentionally, that most of these people have had trauma early on in their life sometime. But trauma could be anything, right? But it's not light trauma. We're talking, but not one time. It could be 4 times, 8 times, but it's happened numerous times. So that begins to shape that who they become. The one thing that I find as a teacher, that's what I consider myself to be, is the most rewarding part of this work is when they learn something new. They always do better. They always meet the expectation. There has never been one guy who's ever let me down in any way whatsoever. Now, how they get into the program, they could choose for a lot. Their motivations can be very different. Maybe just get off the pod, whatever. But something hooks them in the program. The other really great thing is there are 2 other things I want to talk about to be able to talk about. So one thing is that for whatever reason, when they're in the program, it almost perks their interest to become curious about, wow, this is interesting. I didn't know that. What else can I learn? So if the facility has had other programs and they haven't participated, all of a sudden our enrollments are growing up, because the fact is now they're interested in, wow, well, I can learn more. There's still more, which is awesome. As a lifelong learner, that's so rewarding. The other thing that has happened, and just as I said in staffing, well, that's true for corrections. So our staffing levels are not where they need to be. People are not just running to go to work for them. And what's interesting is because we hold them accountable to a higher standard, we track rule violations. So rule violations can be anything. You get in trouble, right? And so, and I don't mean mouthing off, I mean in trouble. And so we've tracked those against the general population. And I can tell you without even hesitating for a second, the men who go through this program, the environment they've created in that facility is so much safer today than it was before we ever put these programs into place. And I'm proud of that for two reasons. One, it keeps them safer, and also it keeps the staff safer. So I look for win-wins. I don't look for a win-lose.
You know, that's powerful. And like, listen, hon, you are a major force. You know, keep doing what you're doing, because man, that is powerful. And, you know, I think that as much as we've talked about being curious, and I'm a teacher, I consider myself a lifelong teacher, a lifelong student, back and forth, right? Which one the same? You're just one, right? And if we can motivate them to be first, if you think about it, we want to motivate everybody. Listeners, my listeners, this podcast is we're trying to make you curious about anything and everything that you feel could be attractive, or a discovery that could unleash something you've been wanting to talk about or do or associated with. So, you know, Kim, your work is just amazing. What inspired you to create this third edition of the From Prison to Possibilities?
The men. I've learned every single time. I listen very carefully. I ask them all the time, you know, what else do we need? What would make this better? And sometimes I'm listening to conversations. So I'm really proud of this particular edition because literally it's turnkey. If you can read, you'll know exactly what to do. Of course, I'd like to be a part of that. On the other hand, one of the things that's new at the very back, and I've taken a look at, rather than thinking locally, national organizations to help the loved ones that are left behind, as well as when they get out. It's literally all the documentation that they need, a robust plan for release. But what's really missing, and this last time I learned it last summer, this is why I wrote the new book, is I was listening to a group of guys. They had not gone through my program. They'd gone through a different program, and I got to interview them. And so we did this exercise around setting a goal and what their assumptions were and the questions that they had. And what I realized in that moment was, oh my gosh, these guys think that they're going to reintegrate with their families when they get out. And I thought that's such a missing opportunity. So I thought, why can't it start now? So I created a set of questions for the guys to use when they talk to their significant other, the baby mama. Then also for their children that they may have left behind, a set of questions, and then a set with their family, because sometimes families are very embarrassed. They won't talk about it. And so how do I get myself back into the family instead of calling and saying, can you put money on my account? And it's me. Why can't it be a
Right.
we? And so I pilot it. I try to pilot everything first before I do anything with it. And so, I piloted in a couple of prisons. And so I went back and said, hey, give me some feedback. And they said, we wish we had had this on week 1. And I said, well, we have it now. And so here's the opportunity to be able to shift the conversation. And it is starting to shift the conversation. It's hard on the inside. It's hard on the outside. It's hard. And so how can we lift each other up and support each other, if no other way, maybe not physically, but certainly emotionally? Because when we talk about relationships, it's all about those emotions and those feelings.
Oh, absolutely. And a couple things between emotions and us being we're these y- emotional, these creatures that have vibrations, that energy, both emotions, and something you said as well about spark me, because I had one of my recent guests is going to be episode's going to be coming on, TJ, shout out to TJ Johnson, talked about how many in my community in Dayton, Ohio, there's more churches than there are grocery stores or access to food. And when you say about how your program works, and I've met many pastors and people, right? Obviously very community driven. They want to bring in the community and say, here, we have resources here. Come be a part of our community and feel the vibe and energy. And, and you sounds like you are just kind of softening and conditioning that energy where on an emotional level, right? that person may not be getting out for a while, but you're creating this reverberation of energy that the family's feeling to him differently or her differently, and that there is not only hope, but this, like, all of a sudden there's you recognize it's actual vehicle. And, again, I applaud your work. It's just amazing. And I guess my I don't know if it's a suggestion or a thought, is that there are so many really passionate uh, pastors and churches around the country and every community that talk about, like, oh yeah, we don't want our sons and our daughters to go off the wrong path. We want them to be able to express themselves and be comfortable with us and know that we're not judging them. But, we go back to what you said, right? There's whole sets of traumas, emotional experiences and circumstance. And we just try to, obviously everybody in these communities, which we know it's all about, it takes a village, as you mentioned. I think it's been too much like what, for whatever reason, for easy attention and, like, naysayers and try to knock you, people try to, if they don't have anything really positive to say, they like to discount things that are said. And I go everything from the men's movement, which, like, people were like, oh, that's, you're supposed to be a man. You can't talk about your feelings. And to that whole thing of, that we're all sensitive, emotional creatures, and we're doing the best we can. And sometimes with kindness in general, my big go-to statement is, okay, maybe you're not comfortable expressing yourself. Maybe you're not, have a whole lot to say, and for whatever reason you're intimidated by that, and you are doing it firsthand in a circumstance where you've got a captive audience. Let's admit it. They don't have many options, and you're giving this very vibrant option, which is probably the polarity of their circumstance in their head, where they think they are. And then all of a sudden you've empowered them, and that energy radiates. And, I just applaud your work, because it is like frontline, and these are human beings that are, can be vibrant, contributing to our society. And again, stepping back, and even if that emotion energy radiates out from me talking to my dad, like I've reconnected with my dad and I'm getting a vibe, how much more likely is that going to keep me out of trouble? Unless in this, right? So that communication is just amazing. And, I'd love to empower you with more conversation and even my program to explore, because I'm looking for different people like yourself that are cutting edge, that have programs already created in their environments of their work, and or to complement as like a little template, as like an add-on type thing for communication, engagement. You get a lot out of it. And, we're kind of like showing people that one person may be very physical, person may be very creative. And that's like
Absolutely.
a Michael Jordan and a Bill Gates. But,
Right.
for them to interface and show that, like, hey, we have everything in common. We just have different talents, right?
Absolutely.
We're concerned about it. So on a humanistic level. So tell me, we just spoke, your Prison to Possibilities this is a book that you wrote years ago, and you're
Um,
now in your third edition.
yes, correct. Yeah. So going back to something you said, I would love two things. One is when you mentioned so many churches in Ohio, it would be really great for us, I'm going to say you and me, to be able to spearhead a community conversation around what's possible, or what if. What if churches came together and started a mentorship, get connected group at their church with youth, and really a structured program, not loose, because these kids need a place that's safe to speak about stuff they're feeling that doesn't happen inside the church service. It doesn't. But where could we create that kind of community where they could say what they need? I mean, there's so many possibilities out there for sure. And I would love to learn more about BASE. It sounds perfect for other things that we can be doing for sure. But yeah, so, my book is From Prison to Possibilities, and I'll continue to, I love this version, but you never know what I'm going to learn. Every year I learn more and more and more. So we'll see.
Right. And maybe there'll be another title and another whole concept of messaging. So let me ask you, Kim, what are like common misconceptions? Like, does the public often have about, individuals within the correctional system? And, you are a game changer, girl. So what do you find is like the biggest hurdle to start that conversation in the first place? As we mentioned, churches and community and stuff.
Well, it depends on who the audience is. So I think the first thing, so I'm thinking about community. What is somebody who has maybe no interest in doing anything because this is not their thing? They think, hey, you know what? Everybody's the same in that prison. They're all bad. There's no chance for transformation. That is not true. I've seen it firsthand, first of all. But what we do need in the United States is honestly programming for all the facilities. 50% of the prisons have no programming. And so let's just imagine that for a minute. So you are locked up 24/7. You probably get an hour outside free time and that's it. So if I'm not taking any programs, I have a lot of idle time. What should I be doing with my idle time? It's not anything good that's happening. I can assure you of that. So why do I care? I live in this neighborhood. I don't want to think about it, Kim. It's just not on my radar. I believe in lock them up and throw away the key. Well, let me just tell you a little fact. 93% of people in prison today are going to get out one day, and they might be your neighbor. So ask yourself, do you want that person to have done nothing and learn more bad ways? Or do you want them to have taken advantage of programming, transform their lives, and want to be an awesome citizen and have a family and have a job and see something new and different for themselves? You choose. To me, it's a simple little conversation.
I would be happy to host multiple people from, so an educator, a a person in the trades, a workforce person that's like, we need bodies. We have people here that can be their mentors, to educators, to pastors, to have a conversation to propel the idea, like, my base program, one of the base program things that helps the base program is like, if we can get a sense of a understanding, everybody's uncomfortable, especially like speaking their mind, especially in groups, whatever. But what happens with the base program is that you are subtly exchanging ideas with people that are not normally would be like you think you would have a conversation with, and on topics that are specific. So it could be in the school, or it could be a Bible study, or it could be a trade, right? And so that's what I'm saying, that the cross application of it. But what the thing for you and your work is that, hey, listen, when we get you out and you're going to go in that first job interview, are you standing straight? Are you aware of how you're standing? Your posture speaks volumes. You're in that nice suit or dress. Are you carrying yourself with a sense of integrity, confidence, and openness to be vulnerable? This is where, on a physiological plane, I have never saw any person. I give you an example. I used to tell the story with my clients all the time. I said, I can see a woman walk into a party and she can have the finest clothing, the finest jewelry, her hair done amazing, but her posture is like, what? She's just like shuffling in and thinking that surface is going to carry her. Or what chain are you wearing around your neck? How low are your drawers hanging down to your knees, or whatever all that is? Compared to walking in and a person that's not very well, okay, you can tell they're from meager means, but they're walking in and it's like they own the place, and they're not, their inner being and their self. So this is where I say, we can help you teach science. We can help you deal with the unruly energy of a young boy or young kid, people, have them engage themselves on a subtle level physically, and make them interact. Like you said, socially. Remember when you got your retail, you love people. You love seeing the dynamic of exchange in society and community. And that's the power of it, where the teacher's hearts are. And, like it's like a mother and their child in terms of just passionate. Some women are, you are like a biggest nurturer, like a universal nurturer I've ever met, because I can feel both your purpose, your passion, your integrity, your work ethic, and you are looking outside yourself and know that the more uncomfortable you make yourself and put into awkward new situations, you're going to grow. And that's where I think that educators, I don't know what the deal is, because I wholeheartedly, I've said this multiple times, I believe the education system in America is running from after World War II. We need to wash the board. We need to talk to business owners, communities, manufacturers, churches, schools, and it starts in schools. And those relationships between the schools, the churches, and the workforce, and people like you that are saying, oh, yeah, we're doing the best we can. What are these vehicles to try to keep less people coming down your path? Right? The idea is to reduce that amount of the cost of prisons. And we know it's become, it's so just crazy. It's like a business itself. And like,
No, it
wait,
is a business.
this is not the kind of business that is ideal for both our community, our society, our nation, and the world.
I think an interesting show would be to bring the people you talked about, but I also think about maybe your in for educators might be to think about a couple of pivotal points. I think there's certain intervention points. So one would be maybe even thinking about going to a school that was with at-risk students. Number one. Number two, bringing in an elementary school teacher like a third grade reading teacher. Because if students can't read at third grade level, they're probably not going to graduate from eighth grade. Definitely not high school. So there's places along the way. And then even bringing in someone, if you have in your area, the equivalent of Head Start, because if you take a look at the journey of all of us, there are certain milestones that theoretically we should have achieved. And so if we miss those milestones, we're putting our lives more in jeopardy. I think it'd be an amazing conversation to have for sure about what's possible, and even taking your community as maybe the place to start in the Midwest to be able to think about this is a best practices model about what could occur across the United States. And the reason I thought about at risk, maybe you're already doing it, but at risk might be your doorway in, is because I got invited. I have a third mentor. My second mentor was Eileen Crowley Reed when I was a university president, who I needed to learn some things that I did not know. I didn't know how to speak to boards. I knew about academics, but there's so many things I didn't know how. And she taught me that. But she could talk to the facilities guy, to the board of trustees, and she was just this amazing presence about her. And the way that she communicated was, I'm like, I want that. Then I had the opportunity to meet a man by the name of Michael Bell, who he doesn't know he's my formal mentor, because he's definitely an informal mentor, but he is the most caring man I've ever met with regards to corrections. He's been doing it for over 30, maybe 40 years at this point, but he really believes in rehabilitation. He's innovation. He's a great mentor to me. And I had been I live in Texas, but he invited me to go to Mississippi first to work in some of the prisons. And so just last year, I asked him, here we are 5 years later, and I said, how come you sent me to Mississippi? And these are two maximum security prisons to start. And he said, Kim, if you could make a difference there, you could make a difference anywhere. And so I kind of think of that as like youth facilities, for example. If you can make a difference there, we can make a difference anywhere.
Did you say his name was Michael Bell?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, maybe he would be part of that trifecta, or we could have try to figure out how many types of different episodes we could have on initial discussions and how to frame that. And it sounds like you would be the person to figure out a proper strategy. Listen, I try to be the best leader of my creative soul right here in all my work. And, I'm both a teacher and I believe a healthcare provider. And when I get people in tune with their physiological self, they have to occupy their minds with me on a movement, and then it's kind of like it what do you call it? It makes you step away from all these thoughts and realities that only you think you can do now, and look for the possibilities. And I also want to go back on those at-risk schools. And as I mentioned before, I am just next weekend, I'll be interviewing an orthopedic knee surgeon with my co-host, who's a mental performance coach with years of coaching experience, and an author with all the caveats, all the things that come along with being in pursuing athletics. So both the podcast you just listened to from Gerald, he mentioned how his love of sports, and it's $1 billion industry, and it shapes a lot about what our culture is and what we identify with. And so those are that's another inroad that, thank you for sharing that. And I would look to explore our potential future conversations, both on and off camera, to coordinate potential podcasts to try to network, and create vibe and create opportunities to explore sharing of what our challenges are and what we could potentially provide each other with, even just ideas, or actually a physical based program, which I have. And that being said, I think, and I really want to thank you for saying this earlier when you mentioned it, the timing of this messaging, because I know everybody I've talked to, they're short in manufacturing here in Ohio. They're in short supply. There are huge amounts of work. A welder can make more money, just as much money as an attorney. Hands-on, especially for the young men. And again, my big passion is for young men. I'm all children, and I think that if we're undercutting the big picture with our efforts, if we're not including the education system as early as you said, those early years, and I have ideas about a particular kind of program, a sub-program for those really toddlers, really young, underneath my program, which it's been in the kind of the back shelf, but I really thank you for sharing all this insights into this front line of where you're on this side of where you have this storehouse of humanity. Okay, circumstance wasn't so great. Ends up they have the situation. You're empowering them. You're facilitating it. So thank you so much for your efforts. I'm sure that indirectly, if people hear this, people that have known somebody's been incarcerated, and they're probably going to identify so much, and hopefully we can make them curious enough, to open their minds and their hearts for their next day. And I think, as you mentioned, your mentors, and like indirectly, like he doesn't even know he's my mentor. The power of that passing word, and you don't have to spend 6 hours a day with a person for 3 years. It could be a passing by with a stranger, or a circumstance where you volunteer and you meet some person, and your exchanges are going to shape the way your next direction goes. But
Absolutely.
So listen, how do you personally stay grounded with all this? I mean, what's and keep resilient while you're working this really emotionally demanding environments?
So, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always taking classes. I have a subscription to Audible. I live in Houston. Traffic is challenging, so I get to learn every day, and that's my attitude about things. But, really, I'm always taking something to really pour into myself so I can learn and then share it out. I've done a lot of personal development work, because I always want to be the best version of myself. I want to be better today than I was yesterday. And it's just fun. It's just fun learning.
Yes. And, you as a true leader, and teachers and instructors, they are true leaders. And, the reason why I teach what I teach is because it propelled me and empowered me. And I'm like, there's no better feeling than sharing it. And to think that I've impacted a person's quality of life. And if they stay and work with me for, 3 weeks, or they stay with me for 13 years as a client or whatever, those relationships, we know those relationships matter. And to be able to have that sense of community. And I love my life. My life is so full. I've never been more content at this age into my 60s, where I'm like, okay, it's precious. and you were blessed. Don't 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 underestimate the power of your contribution, and keep trying to learn more, like you said, to grow, to make your message even more powerful, more fluent. And when you mentioned the audio podcast, everybody's in that, right? Everybody is sitting in traffic or doing something that, whatever, those audio podcasts, I do it a tremendous amount. And you just have these little bits and pieces where you're getting mentored and just sharing with a friend. Oh, I don't know that guy, but man, he's okay. I can't believe he said that to him. Or, oh my gosh, he shared that story. And this is what's both empowering and captivating and like almost entertaining. Be like, wow, that's possible. So listen, Kim, it's been a really pleasure talking with you. We're going to put your contact information. We're definitely going to have some conversation.
Great.
My life is crazy busy. I know you're crazy busy, but any way we can continue to, maybe we'll create some podcasts in the audio versions where we're going to definitely listen to them over and over and continue to grow and expand on that. It's just like that we call it, let's create this little potential machine of not brainiacs. That's not the right word, of inspirational thinkers, right? To show that, listen, we're all, so many of us are doing in this education and business and in our churches and our neighbors, where we have to really like step outside, smile, and be open to just anything, but we have to open up. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to some more conversations, and we're going to talk.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. So everybody, I hope you guys all enjoyed the episode. I've never been more, I'm always like nervous with each interview, Kim, but I am so stoked right now. I love it. I do this. This is my passion project. So everybody, till next time, kids, bye-bye.
Professor.